Welcome everybody to another Voice of Nick show. We're doing more of our Posthomerica audiobook production, and I gotta turn off this. I have a screen that shows me on it. We are doing something different this time. We've narrated on stream before. We're doing another one of our run-throughs of a chapter, but this time it's a chapter that we already did. Something that I realized near the end of narrating the final chapters of the book. This project's been going for a year, and in that year I've learned a lot, not in terms of art and creating the illustrations and everything, that's also true, but I also learned a lot in terms of the way that I approach the narration, and going back to the first few chapters, I realized that they were really not up to the level that the later chapters were. So I've gone back and re-recorded the first 3 chapters, which means that we're also throwing out all of the work we did on editing those chapters. But that's fine. As I always say on these streams, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing twice. So we're gonna go back in. We're gonna do a run through of book 4, which is where Achilles has already died. They're at the funeral games of Achilles. So there's a lot of sports stuff happening in this one. We're gonna, for the re-records, we're going all the way through book 7. So book 1 through 7 are getting re-recorded. Book 8 through 14 are fine, I guess. They're good to go. Those ones are more recent. So let's do it. This one's just a run through, so I don't obviously have like my audiobook mic in front of me. I don't have my soundproofing stuff behind me, but we don't need it because we're just essentially figuring out the intonation, getting it spoken once, which is really important when you're doing an audiobook, I think, is to have said it once so that you kind of wrapped your head around the way you're going to say it in the actual narration. And of course, we also figure out all the pronunciations, for this chapter. So let's do it. The first order of business, we want to look at the some of the earlier chapters, just match the tone. We also want to go back and look. Let's see, book 3 re-record part 2. We had a second part of this, so let's pull that up as well. It's number 732. No, 733. Let's do it.
Book 1.
Book 1.
How died for Troy,
the queen of the Amazons,
Penthesilea.
Penthesilea. You also, as with many of these episodes, you won't be able to comment on these except for with emojis or emotes, but I hope you enjoyed the show and enjoy a nice little preview of the re-recorded chapter 4.
Book 3.
Book 3.
How by the
shaft of a god
laid
low
was
hero Achilles.
And by the Hellespont
they buried him.
aching heart, despite their dread of mighty
Achilles'
the
spear.
gates to earth, rending
them from the hinges,
or the bolts,
hurling himself against them had they snapped.
And for the Danaan,
You can see I'm just trying to get the intonation that I already had. Gift.
It lies within the Euxine Sea that
brought them over from Hellas.
Then
returned to Helicon the Muses. Daughters sank. We always want to match the end of the previous chapter so we know where we're coming from. So here we go. Then returned to Helicon the Muses. 'Neath the sea, wailing the dear dead, Nereus' daughters sank. Book 4. How in the funeral games of Achilles heroes contended. Nor did the hapless Trojans leave unwept the warrior king Hippolochus' hero son, but laid in front of the Dardanian gate upon the pyre that captain war renowned. But him Apollo's self caught swiftly up out of the blazing fire, and to the winds gave him, to bear away to Lycia land. And fast and far they bare him, 'neath the glens of high Telandrus, Telandris. Neath the glens of high Telandris, to a lovely glade, and for a moment above his grave upheaved a granite rock. And for a monument above his grave upheaved a granite rock. The nymphs therefrom made gush the hallowed water of a stream, forever flowing, which the tribes of men still call fair fleeting Glaucus. This the gods wrought for an honor to the Lycian king. But for Achilles the Argives still mourned beside the swift ships. Heart sick were they all with dolorous pain and grief. Each yearned for him as for a son. No eye in that wide host was tearless. But the Trojans with great joy exulted, seeing their sorrow from afar, and the great fire that spake their foe consumed. And thus a vaunting voice amidst them cried. Let's see what we had for that originally. The nice thing about doing these re-records, by the way, I'm going to be on screen, full screen the whole time. The book will be in stores soon, but I'm not going to show it full screen on the episode until it's available. Or if you want to read it, it is available in many formats, but hopefully you'll consider checking out the book that we're making here. Okay, so we're going to look at the original book 4. We're going to find that spot. We're going to make a ref file for this guy.
Joy exulted, seeing their sorrow from afar,
You can see the...
and the great fire that spake their foe consumed.
Yeah.
And thus a vaunting voice amidst them cried.
At this point I'm getting a little better, but it's just I didn't have the intonation that I think I needed there. It needs more of like a gruffer voice.
Now hath Cronion from his heaven vouchsafed a joy past hope unto our longing eyes, to see Achilles fallen before Troy.
I don't like that voice. I was going to come up with something else. A voice amidst them cried, Now hath Cronion from his heaven vouchsafed a joy... No, I don't like the crack voice guy. Now hath Cronion from his heaven... No. Now hath Cronion from his heaven vouchsafed a joy past hope unto our longing eyes, to see Achilles fallen before Troy. Now he has smitten down the glorious hosts of Troy, I trow, shall win a breathing space from blood of death, and from the murderous... I don't like that either. Now hath Cronion from his heaven... Now hath Cronion from his heaven vouchsafed a joy past hope unto our longing eyes, to see Achilles fallen before Troy. Now he has smitten down the glorious hosts of Troy, I trow, shall win a breathing space from blood and death from the murderous fray. Ever his heart devised the Trojan's bane. In his hands maddened I the spear of doom with gore besprent, and none of us that faced him in the fight beheld another dawn. But now I wot Achaea's valorous son shall flee unto their galleys shapely proud, since slain Achilles lies. Ah, that the might of Hector were still here, that he might slay the Argives one and all amidst their tents. So in unbridled joy a Trojan cried, but one more wise and prudent answered him.
So in unbridled joy thou deemest that yon murderous Danae...
So it's sort of a flat-voiced guy. Answered him. Thou deemest that yon murderous Danaan host will straightway get them to the ships, to flee over the misty sea. Nay, still their lust is hot for fight. Us will they no wise fear. Still are there left strong battle-eager men, as Aias, as Tydides, as Atreus' sons. Though dead Achilles be, I still fear these. Oh, that Apollo's silver bow would end them. Then in that day were given to our prayers a breathing space from war and ghastly death. In heaven was dole among the immortal ones, even all that helped the stalwart Danaan's cause. In clouds like mountains piled they. In clouds like mountains piled, they veiled their heads for grief of soul. But glad those others were who fain would speed Troy to a happy goal. Then unto Cronos' son Hera spake. Okay, so we do have a Hera reference file. Let's pull that up.
What deed of
outrage, Phoebus, hast thou done this day?
Forgetful
of that day. Hera spake. Zeus, lightning father, wherefore helpest thou Troy, all forgetful of the fair-haired bride who once to Peleus didst thou give to wife, midst Pelion's... Pelion? It's gotta be Pelion. Pelion. Midst Pelion's glens. Thyself didst bring to pass those spousals of a goddess. On that day all we immortals feasted there, and gave gifts passing fair. All this dost thou forget, and hast devised for Hellas heaviest woe. For Hellas heaviest woe. So spake she, but Zeus answered not a word. For pondering there he sat with burdened breast, thinking soon how the Argives should destroy the city of Priam, thinking how himself would visit on the victors ruin dread in war, and on the great sea thunder voiced. Such thoughts were his, ere long to be fulfilled. I still got a tinge in my voice or something from when I was at South by Southwest. I'm still recovering. Such thoughts were his, ere long to be fulfilled. Now sank the sun to ocean's fathomless flood. Over the dim land the infinite darkness stole, wherein men gain a little rest from toil. Then by the ships, despite their sorrow, supped the Argives, for ye cannot thrust aside hunger's importunate... Is it importunate? Importunate. Hunger's importunate craving, when it comes upon the breast, but straightway heavy and faint lithe limbs become, nor is there remedy until one satisfy this clamorous guest. Therefore these ate the meat of eventide in grief for Achilles. Hard necessity constrained them all. And when they had broken bread, sweet sleep came on them, loosening from their frames care's heavy chain, and quickening strength anew. This one's a tough chapter because there's really no action in it. It's a lot of, sad voice. But when the starry bears had eastward turned their heads, expectant of the uprushing light of Helios, and when woke the Queen of Dawn, then rose from sleep the stalwart Argive men, purposing for the Trojans death and doom. Stirred were they like... Oh, so this part would be action-packed then, because they still think they're going to battle. But when the starry bears had eastward turned their heads, expectant of the uprushing light of Helios, and when woke the Queen of Dawn, then rose from sleep the stalwart Argive men, purposing for the Trojans death and doom. Stirred were they like the roughly ridging sea Icarian, or as sudden rippling corn in harvest field, what time the rushing wings of the cloud-gathering west sweep over it. So upon Hellespont's strand the folk were stirred, and to these eager hearts cried Tydeus' son. Oh, we got the references right here. So we want Diomedes, Tydeus' son.
If we be
battle by his friends,
indeed, more fiercely fight we now the hated foe. Lest they take heart.
So he's kind of like excitable guy. If we be battle-biders friends indeed, more fiercely fight we now the hated foe. Lest they take heart because Achilles lives no longer. Come, with armor, car, and steed, let us beset them. Glory waits our toil. But battle-eager Aias answering spake. So Aias, or Ajax. Here we go.
Achilles.
Achilles.
All the air about
All
mine
the air
ears
about
is full of
mine ears is
multitudinous
full
air.
of... Okay. Brave be thy words, and no wise idle talk, kindling the dauntless Argive men, whose hearts before were battle eager to the fight against the Trojan men, O Tydeus. Whose hearts before were battle eager to the fight against the Trojan men, O Tydeus' son. But we must needs abide the ships till goddess Thetis comes forth of the sea, for that her heart is purposed to set here fair athlete prizes for the funeral games. This yesterday she told me, ere she plunged into sea depths. Yea, spake to me apart from other Danaans, and I trow by this her haste hath brought her nigh. Yon Trojan men, though Peleus' son hath died, shall have small heart for battle, while myself am yet alive, and thou, and noble Atreus' son, the king. And noble Atreus' son, the king. So spake the mighty son of Telamon, but knew not that a dark and bitter doom for him should follow hard upon those games, by fate's contrivance. Answered Tydeus' son. Yeah, the next chapter is all about what happens to Aias.
If we be
battle-biders. Oh, friend, if Thetis comes indeed this day with goodly gifts for her son's funeral games, then bide we by the ships, and keep we here all others. Meet it is to do the will of the immortals. Yea, to Achilles too, though the immortals willed it not, ourselves must render honor grateful to the dead. So spake the battle-eager Tydeus' son. And lo, the bride of Peleus gliding came forth of the sea, like the still breath of dawn, and suddenly was with the Argive throng, where eager-faced they waited, some that looked soon to contend in the great athlete strife, and some to joy in seeing the mighty strive. Amidst that gathering Thetis' sable stalls set down her prizes, and she summoned forth Achaea's champions. At her hest they came. But first amidst them all rose Neleus' son, not as desiring in the strife of fists to toil, nor strain of wrestling, for his arms and all his sinews were with grievous eld outworn, but still his heart and brain were strong. Of all the Achaeans none could match himself against him in the folkmote's war of words. Yea, even Laertes' glorious son to him ever gave place when men for speech were met. Nor he alone, but even the kingliest of Argives, Agamemnon, lord of spears. Now in their midst he sang the gracious queen of Nereids, sang how she in wilsomeness of beauty was of all the sea-maids chief. Well pleased she hearkened. Yet again he sang, singing of Peleus' bridal of delight, which all the blessed immortals brought to pass by Pelion's crest. Sang of the ambrosial feast, when the swift hours brought in immortal hands meats not of earth, and heaped in golden mounds. Sang how the silver tables were set forth in haste by Themis blithely laughing. Sang how breathed Hephaestus, purest flame of fire. Sang how the nymphs in golden chalices mingled ambrosia. Sang the ravishing dance twined by the Graces' feet. Sang of the chants of the Muses raised, and how its spell enthralled all mountains, rivers, all the forest brood. How raptured was the infinite firmament, Chiron's fair caverns, yea, the very gods. It's unclear to me, in this story it seems like Chiron and, Phoenix, both had roles in raising Achilles. I don't know. That's one of those things where it's like, depending on which story you're in, one or the other did it. But they kind of both are canon. Such noble strain did Neleus' son pour out in the Argives' ears, and they hearkened with ravishing souls. Then in their midst he sang once more the imperishable deeds of princely Achilles. All the mighty throng acclaimed him with delight. From that beginning with fitly chosen words did he extol the glorious hero, how he voyaged and smote 12 cities, how he marched over leagues on leagues of land and spoiled 11, how he slew Telephus and Eetion's might renowned in Thebe. Thebe? I think it's Thebe. Thebe. It looks like it should be Thebe, but it's not. How... Yeah, this is going to be a few proper nouns here. I don't think we need a reference sheet. We only have like 2 of these. Okay. In Thebe, how his spear laid Caenis. How his spear laid Caenis low, Poseidon's son, and godlike Polydorus, Troilus the goodly. Oh, and godlike Polydorus, Troilus the goodly, princely Asteropaeus, and how he dyed with blood the river streams of Xanthus, and with countless corpses choked his murmuring flow. When from the limbs he tore Lycaon's life, beside the sounding river. Lycaon? Lycaon. Beside the sounding river. And how he smote down Hector, how he slew Penthesilea, and the godlike son of splendor-throned Dawn. All this he sang to Argives, which already knew the tale, sang of his giant mould, how no man's strength in fight could stand against him, nor in games where strong men strive for mastery, where the swift contend with flying feet or hurrying wheels of chariots, nor in combat panoplied, how in goodlihead he far outshone all Danaans, and how his bodily might was measureless in the stormy clash of war. Last he prayed heaven that he might see a son, like that great sire, from sea-washed Skyros come. That noble song acclaiming Argives praised. Yea, silver-looted Thetis smiled, and gave the singer fleet-foot horses, given of old beside Caicus' mouth by Telephus to Achilles. And when he healed the torturing wound with that same spear wherewith himself had pierced Telephus' thigh, and thrust the point clear through. These Nestor, Neleus' son, to his comrades gave, and glorying in their godlike lord, they led the steeds unto his ships. Then Thetis set amidst the athlete ring 10 kine, to be her prizes for the foot race, and by each ran a fair suckling calf. These the bold might of Peleus' tireless son had driven down from slopes of Ida, prizes of his spear. To strive for these rose up to victory fain, Teucer the first, the son of Telamon, and Aias of the Locrian archers chief. These twain with swift hands girded them about with loincloths, reverencing the goddess bride of Peleus, and the sea maids, who with her came to behold the Argives athletes' sport. And Atreus' son, lord of all the Argive men, showed them the turning goal of that swift course. Then these, the queen of rivalry, spurred on, as from the starting lines like falcons swift they sped away. Long doubtful was the race. Now as the Argives gazed would Aias' friends shout, now rang out the answering cheer from friends of Teucer. But when in their eager speed close on the end they were, then Teucer's feet were trammelled by unearthly powers. Some god or demon dashed his foot against the stock of a deep-rooted tamarisk. Sorely wrenched was his left ankle. Round the joint upswelled the veins high-ridged. A great shout rang from all that watched the contest. Aias darted past exultant. Ran his Locrian folk to hail their lord, with sudden joy in all their souls. Then to his ships they drave the kine. And cast fodder before them. Eager helpful friends led Teucer halting thence. The leeches drew blood from his foot. Then over it they laid soft shredded linen ointment smeared, and swathed swathed swathed, and swathed with smooth bands round, and charmed away the pain. That's an interesting moment because a similar thing happens in the Aeneid, where there's like a race and somebody breaks their foot or whatever. But in the Aeneid, the guy whines so much that they give him a prize anyway. In this one, Aias just kind of, or rather Teucer just kind of takes it. But he gets his due. Charmed away the pain. Then swiftly rose two mighty-hearted ones, eager to match their strength in wrestling strain, the son of Tydeus and the giant Aias. Into the midst they strode, and marveling gazed the Argives on men shapen like to gods. Then grappled they, like lions famine stung, fighting amidst the mountains over a stag, whose strength is even balanced. No whit less is one than other in their deadly rage. So these long time in might were even matched, till Aias locked his strong hands round the son of Tydeus, straining hard to break his back. But he, with wrestling craft and strength combined, shifted his hip neath Telamon's son, and heaved the giant up. With a side twist wrenched free from Aias' ankle lock his thigh, and so with one huge shoulder heave to the earth he threw that one huge shoulder heave to earth he threw that mighty champion, and himself came down astride him. Then a mighty shout went up, but battle-stormer Aias, chafed in mind, sprang up, hot eager to essay again that grim encounter. From his terrible hands he dashed the dust, and challenged furiously with a great voice Tydides. Not a whit that other quailed, but rushed to close with him. Rolled up the dust in clouds neath their feet. Hurtling, they met like battling mountain bulls that clash to prove their dauntless strength, and spurn the dust, while with roaring their dauntless strength, and spurn the dust, while with their roaring all the hills re-echo, and in their desperate fury these dashed their strong heads together, straining long against each other with their massive strength, hard panting in the fierce rage of their strife, while from the mouths dripped foam flakes to the ground. So strained they twain with grapple of brawny hands. Neath that hard grip their backs and sinewy necks cracked, even as when in mountain glades the trees dash storm-tormented boughs together. Oft Tydides clutched at Aias' brawny thighs, but could not stir his steadfast-rooted feet. Oft Aias hurled his whole weight on him, bowed his shoulders backward, strove to press him down, and to new grips their hands were shifting aye. All round the gazing people shouted, some cheering on glorious Tydeus' son, and some the might of Aias. Then the giant swung the shoulders of his foe to right, to left, then gripped him neath the waist. With one fierce heave and giant effort, hurled him like a stone to earth. The floor of Troyland rang again, as fell Tydides. Shouted all the folk. Yet leapt he up, all eager to contend with giant Aias for the third last fall. But Nestor rose and spake unto the twain. We have a Nestor reference file here.
Hither to me, Thrasymedes,
Hither to me, Thrasymedes, war renowned.
To thrust back from thy
Help me
brother's
to
corse.
thrust back from my... Unto the twain. From the grapple of wrestling, noble sons, forbear, for all we know that ye be mightiest of Argives, since the great Achilles died. Of Argives, since the great Achilles died. Since the great Achilles died. Then these from toil refrained, and from their brows wiped with their hands the plenteous streaming sweat. They kissed each other, and forgat their strife. Then Thetis, queen of goddesses, gave to them 4 handmaids, and those strong and aweless ones marvel beholding them. For these surpassed all captive maids in beauty and household skill, save only lovely tressed Briseis. These Achilles captive brought from Lesbos Isle, and in their service joyed. The first was made stewardess of the feast and lady of meats. The second to the feasters poured the wine. The third shed water on their hands thereafter. The fourth bare all away, the banquet done. These Tydeus' son and giant Aias shared, and parted 2 and 2 unto their ships. 2 and 2 unto their ships sent they those fair and serviceable ones. Next, for the play of fists Idomeneus rose, for cunning was he in all athlete lore. But none came forth to meet him, yielding all to him, the elder born, with reverent awe. So in their midst Thetis gave unto him a chariot and fleet steeds, which theretofore mighty Patroclus from the ranks of Troy drave, when he slew Sarpedon, seed of Zeus. These to his henchmen gave Idomeneus, to drive unto the ships. Himself remained still sitting in the glorious athlete ring. Then Phoenix to the stalwart Argives cried. We got a Phoenix reference file as well.
Thou art reft
Thou
from
art
me, dear
reft from me,
child,
dear child,
and cureless
pain
hast
hast left to me.
His arms
In
thee
his
through
arms thee. Phoenix a little bit like Nestor, I guess. Okay, yeah, they're both old guys. Now to Idomeneus the gods have given a fair prize uncontested, free of toil of mighty arms and shoulders, honouring the elder born with bloodless victory. But lo, ye younger men, another prize awaiteth the swift play of cunning hands. Step forth then, gladden great Pleiades' soul. He spake, they heard, but each on other looked, and loath to essay the contest, all sat still, till Neleus' son rebuked those laggard souls. Nestor.
Hither to
me, Thrasymedes.
None would name
forth. Nestor's got a little bit more of a smoky voice. Those laggard souls. Friends, it was shame that men should shun the play of clenched hands, who in that noble sport hath skill, wherein young men delight, which links glory to toil. Ah, that my thews were strong, as when King Peleus' funeral feast, I and Acastus kinsmen joining hands, when I with godlike Polydeuces stood in gauntlet strife, in even balanced fray, and when Ancaeus in the wrestler's ring, mightier than all beside, yet feared and shrank from me, and dared not strive with me in that day. For the dare then amidst the Epean men. Epean? I think it's Epean. Epean. Oh, that's why you do it. Epean. Amidst the Epean men. No battle bunch as they. I had vanquished them for all his might. Vanquished him for all his might, and dashed him to the dust by dead Amarincus' tomb. Amarincus' tomb. And thousands round sat marvelling at my prowess and my strength. Therefore against me not a second time raised he his hands, strong wrestler though he were. And so I won an uncontested prize. But now old age is on me, and many griefs. Therefore I bid you, whom it well beseems, to win the prize, for glory crowns the youth who bears away the meed of athlete strife. Nestor's MO is kind of to make people feel bad that he's an old man. That he does that like 10 times throughout this story, where he basically says like, oh, if only I were still young, I'd beat you up. It almost seems like a Odysseus type of thing where he's like tricking people, because he gets out of being killed by Memnon that way. Or, you know, he's kind of like trying to save his son from the war, but he literally, by doing that, he gets out of being killed in the battle. So yeah, whatever works, you know. The meed of the athlete strife. Stirred by his gallant chiding, a brave young man rose, son of haughty godlike Panopeus, the man who framed the horse, the bane of Troy, not long thereafter. So this is, what's his name? Epius. Not long thereafter, none dared meet him now in play of fists, albeit in deadly craft of war. When Ares rushes through the field, he was not cunning. But for strife of hands the prize uncontested had been won by stout Epius. Yea, he was at point to bear it thence unto the Achaean ships. But one strode forth to meet him, Theseus' son, the spearman Acamas. Acamas, the mighty of heart, bearing already on his swift hands girt the battle-hide gauntlets. No, bearing already on his swift hands girt the hard hide gauntlets, which Avenor? Avenor. I think it's Avenor. The way I wrote it is not really phonetically valid. Which Avenor's son, Agelaus, on his prince's hands had drawn. Agelaus, that's correct. Agelaus, on his prince's hands, had drawn with courage-kindling words. The comrades then of Panopeus' princely son for Epius raised a heartening cheer. He like a lion stood forth in the midst, his strong hands gauntleted with bull's hide, hard as a horn. Hard as horn. Loud rang the cheers from side to side of that great throng, to fire the courage of the mighty ones, to clash hands in the gory play. Sooth, little spur needed they for eagerness of fight, but ere they closed, they flashed out proving blows, to what if still as theretofore their arms were limber and lithe, unclogged by toil of war. Then faced each other, and upraised their hands with ever-watching eyes, and short, quick steps a-tiptoe, and with ever-shifting feet, each still eluding other's crushing might. Then with a rush they closed like thunderclouds hurled on each other by the tempest blast, flashing forth lightnings, while the welkin thrills, as clash the clouds and hollow roar the winds. So neath the hard hide gauntlets clash their jaws. Down streamed the blood, and from their brows the sweat, blood-streaked, made on the flushed cheeks crimson bars. Fierce without pause they fought, and never flagged Epius, but threw all his stormy strength into the onrush. Yet did Theseus' son never lose heart, but baffled the straight blows of those strong hands, and by his fighting craft fling them to right and left, leapt in, brought home a blow to his eyebrow, cutting to the bone. Even then with counterstroke Epius reached Acamas' temple, and hurled him to the ground. Swift he sprang up, and on his stalwart foe rushed, smote his head. As he rushed in again, the other, slightly swerving, sent his left clean to his brow, his right, with all his might behind it, to his nose. Yet Acamas still warded, and struck with all the manifold shifts of fighting craft. But now the Achaeans all bade stop the fight. Bade stop the fight, though eager still were both to strive for coveted victory. Then came their henchmen, and the gory gauntlets loosened in haste from their strong hands. Now drew they breath from that great labor, as they bathed their brows with sponges myriad poured. Comrades and friends with pleading words then drew them face to face, and prayed in friendship straight forget your wrath. So to their comrades' suasion hearken they, for wise men ever bear a placable mind.
Placable.
A placable mind. They kissed each other, and their hearts forgat that bitter strife. Then Thetis' sable stoles gave to their glad hands 2 great silver bowls, the which Euneus, Jason's warrior son, and sea-washed Lemnos to Achilles gave to ransom strong Lycaon from his hands. I can. These had Hephaestus fashioned for his gift to glorious Dionysus, when he brought his bride divine to Olympus, Minos child, far famous, whom in sea-washed Dia, I think it's Dia, far famous, who in sea-washed Dia's isle Theseus unwitting left. The wine god brimmed with nectar these, and gave them to his son, and Thoas at his death to Hypsipyle, with great possessions left them. She bequeathed the bowls to her godlike son, who gave them up unto Achilles for Lycaon's life. The one the son of lordly Theseus took, and goodly Epeus sent to his ship with joy the other. Then their bruises and their scars did Podalirius tend with loving care. First pressed he out the black humours, then his hands deftly knit up the gashes. Salves he laid thereover, given him by his sire of old, such as had virtue in one day to heal the deadliest hurts, yea, seeming cureless wounds. Such as had virtue in one day to heal the deadliest hurts, yea, seeming cureless wounds. Straight was the smart assuaged. I always get that one wrong. Assuaged. And healed the scars upon their brows, and neath their clustering hair. Then for the archery test Oileus' son stood forth with Teucer, the which the race erewhile contended. Far away from these Agamemnon, lord of spears, set up a helm, crested with plumes, and spake. I'll do an Agamemnon voice for this. When it's a really short piece of text or piece of dialogue, sometimes I just do it in the narrator's voice, because it's a little jarring to hear the character speak.
Thou hast perished.
Chiefest. Agamemnon has a fun voice.
Has perished and left the Achaean host fenceless.
And spake. The master shot is that which shears the hair crest clean away. Then straightway Aias shot his arrow first, and smote. Then straightway Aias shot his arrow first, and smote the helm ridge. Sharply rang the brass. Then Teucer's second with most earnest heed shot. The swift shaft hath shorn the plume away. Loud shouted all the people as they gazed, and praised him without stint, for still his foot halted in pain. Yet nowise marred his aim when with his hands he sped the flying shaft. Then Peleus' bride gave unto him the arms of godlike Troilus, the goodliest of all fair sons whom Hecuba had borne in hallowed Troy. Yet of his goodlihead no joy she had. The prowess and the spear of fell Achilles reft his life from him, as when a gardener with new whetted scythe mows down, ere it may seed, a blade of corn or poppy, in a garden dewy fresh and blossom flushed, which by a watercourse crowdeth its blooms. Mows it ere it reach its goal, mows it ere it may reach its goal of bringing offspring to the birth. And with his scythe sweep make its life work vain and barren of all issue, never more to be fostered by the dews of spring. So did Peleus, so did Pelides cut down Priam's son, the godlike and beautiful, the beardless yet, and virgin of a bride, almost a child. Yet the destroyer fate had lured him on to war, upon the threshold of glad youth, when youth is bold, and the heart feels no void. Yeah, I can't hit those low notes really. I hope I can do it on the day. But I've waited like a week since I got back from South by, so at some point it might just be that I have to kind of like get back in the groove, you know? Forthwith a bar of massy iron, and long from the swift pleading hand did many essay to hurl, but not an Argive could prevail to cast that ponderous mass. Aias alone sped it from his strong hand, and in the time of as in the time of harvest might a reaper fling from him a dry oak bough, when all the fields are parched, and all men marveled to behold how far flew from his hand the bronze, which scarce 2 men hard straining had uplifted from the ground. Even this Antaeus might was wont to hurl. Antaeus it might be. Antaeus. Even this Antaeus might was wont to hurl erstwhile, ere the strong hands of Hercules overmastered them. This with much spoil beside Hercules took, and kept it to make sport for his invincible hand, but afterward gave it to valiant Peleus, whom with him had smitten fair-towered Ilium's burg renowned. And he to Achilles gave it, whose swift ships bare it to Troy, to put him aye in mind of his own father, as with eager will he fought with stalwart Trojans, and to be a worthy test wherewith to prove his strength. Even this did Aias from his brawny hand fling far. So then the Nereid gave to him the glorious arms from godlike Memnon stripped. Marveling the Argives gazed on them. They were a giant's war gear. Laughing a glad laugh that man renowned received them. He alone could wear them on his brawny limbs. They seemed as they had even been molded to his frame. The great bar thence he bore withal, to be his joy when he was fain of athlete toil. Still sped the contest on, and many rose now for the leaping. Far beyond the marks of all the rest brave Agapenor sprang. Agapenor. Loud shouted all for that victorious leap, and Thetis gave him the battle gear of mighty Caenis, who had smitten first Protesilaus, and then had reft the life from many more, till Peleus' son slew him first of the chiefs of grief-enshrouded Troy. Next in the javelin cast Euryalus hurled far beyond all rivals, while the folk shouted aloud. No archer, so they deemed, could speed a winged shaft farther than his cast. Therefore the Aeacid hero's mother gave to him a deep-wide silver oil flask, taken by Achilles in possession when his spear slew Mynes, and he spoiled Lyrnessus' wealth. Lyrnessus? Mynes, I'm pretty sure is correct. Mynes. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, I made an exhaustive pronunciation guide for myself, which I do for every audiobook that I do, so that I can check back, and sometimes I even record the pronunciations as well. And I also make all these reference files of what the characters sound like, so I can remember what, somebody from the beginning, what they sound like at the end and all that stuff. But the pronunciation guide, since I'm publishing this book, I figured it would be fun as well for people who are reading it, because whenever I read Greek stories like this, I always want to know how the characters are pronounced, because you're not hearing it spoken. So audiobook listeners will hear me pronounce the names, but book readers, text-based book readers, will see there will be the pronunciation guide published at the end, so you can actually check literally every name and proper noun in this book has a phonetic pronunciation that I wrote, and it's like an easy to read phonetic pronunciation. It's not with like all the squiggly lines and stuff. I don't know that I've seen anybody do that. I'm sure people have done that before, but it's kind of like a bonus thing that since I already had made it for myself, I figured like, why not publish it? Then fiery-hearted Aias eagerly rose, challenging to strife of hands and feet the mightiest hero there. But marveling they marked his mighty thews, and no man dared confront him. Chilling dread had palsied all their courage. From their hearts they feared him, lest his hands invincible should all to break his adversary's face, and naught but pain be that man's meed. But at the last all men made signs to battle-bider Euryalus, for well they knew him skilled in fighting craft. But he too feared that giant, and he cried. So for this, we're actually going to pull a reference file for Euryalus. I think it's his only appearance.
Whose strength is even balanced, no whit less is watching might. Then with a rush they closed like thundercloud,
God, I don't like
hurled on each other by the tempest blast.
the pronunciation or the tone in my original recording is no good.
With loving care. First pressed he out black humors.
Wow, we're pretty close to the end of the
ere it
chapter.
may reach its goal of bringing offspring far. So then the Nereid gave to him the Pinor sprang. Greatest hero there.
That's
But
it.
the last, all men made signs to battle-bider Euryalus,
God,
for
it's
well
not
they
good.
knew him skilled in fighting craft. But he too feared that giant. Friends, any other Achaean whom ye will, blithe will I face. But mighty Aias, no. Far doth he overmatch.
I kind of like this one. This is a good voice. I don't know what I was doing with the accent, but the voice sounds good. So we're gonna make our ref file, which means we're basically just saving out a sample of that character's voice so I can check it later. So it is Euryalus. I'm gonna name it. And you can see, I don't know, you can't really see, but if you look at the screen here, these are all the reference files that I've made for characters. And these are just speaking role characters.
Friends, any other Achaean.
Any other Achaean. So he's kind of like laughing it off. And he cried, friends, any other Achaean whom ye will, blithe will I face. But mighty Aias? No, no. Far doth he overmatch me. He will rend mine heart, if in the onset anger rise within him. From his hands invincible I trow, I should not win to the ships alive. Loud laughed they all, but glowed with triumph joy the heart of Aias. Gleaming talents twain of silver he from Thetis' hands received, his uncontested prize. His stately height called to... Oh, I love this little section here. His stately height called to her mind her dear son, and she sighed. There's not a lot, like, you don't really hear anything from Thetis' perspective in this part, who is obviously going through a lot. She's conducting the funeral games for her son who had died, like, the day before, or a couple of days before. But that's, like, a nice little one moment where it's like, Aias reminds her of Achilles and it makes her sad. It's a great moment. And she sighed. They which had skill in chariot driving then rose at the contest summons eagerly. Menelaus first, Eurypylus bold in fight. Eumelus, Thoas, godlike Polypoetes. Eumelus, Thoas, godlike Polypoetes, harnessed their steeds and led them to the cars, all panting for the joy of victory. Then rode they in a glittering chariot rank out to one place, to a stretch of sand, and stood ranged at the starting line. The reins they grasped in strong hands quickly, while the chariot steeds shoulder to shoulder fretted, all afire to take the lead at starting. Okay, we're going to change that. All afire to take the lead at starting. Pawed the sand, pricked ears, and over their frontlets flung the foam. With sudden stiffened sinews those car lords lashed with their whips the tempest-looted steeds. Then swift as harpies sprang they forth. They strained furiously at the harness, onward whirling the chariots, bounding ever from the earth. Thou couldst not see a wheel track, no, nor print of hoof upon the sand. They verily flew. Up from the plain the dust clouds to the skies soared, the smoke of burning, or a mist rolled round the mountain forelands by the might of the dark south wind or the west, when wakes a tempest, when the hillsides stream with rain. Burst to the front Eumelus' steeds, behind close pressed the team of godlike Thoas. Shouts still answered shouts that cheered each chariot, while onward they swept across the wide-wayed plain. So this is this outstanding circumstance here.
Lacuna.
So first of all, for some reason I don't have that in my pronunciation guide, which I'm going to put in there. Lacuna. It always auto capitalizes. La, L-U-H, Ku, K-O-O, N-U-H, na. That's how I write out the pronunciations of stuff. So, good. Good. Lacuna. Lacuna Matata. That's how we'll remember it. The Wide Wade Plain. Lacuna. Editor's note. A section here of the original manuscript has been lost to time. We return to the story after the race, in the middle of a character's speech. I don't know if I should deliver that like a... like the narrator, or like... We return to the story after the race, in the middle of a character's speech. I wonder if I should say after Menelaus has won the race. No, I'm not going to do that, because it's too anticlimactic to say it like that. Literally, in the original manuscript of this story, it's like destroyed at a certain point, and sometimes there's little spots where they can't read it, and then the editors will write in, or the original translators will write in what they think it was supposed to say. But this kind of lacuna is so big that they can't figure out. It's like irresponsible to try and write it themselves. It's too big of a section, so they just say like, this is lost, and that this is the only time that happens in this story. But there's a lot of stories, a huge, incredible amount of Greek stories that are just fragments, and there's more lacuna than not. So it's pretty sad. It would be great. I don't know how somebody would ever... If we invented time machines, it would be nice to somebody go back and get all these stories intact. Okay, so it's literally in the middle of a character's speech. I am assuming it's Nestor who's speaking here. Oh, we already have his ref file open.
Hither to me,
Thrasymedes. So we're going to come back. We were right in the middle of the chariot race. Now we come back here in a speech. From hallowed Elis, when he had achieved a mighty triumph, in that he outstripped the swift car of Car of Oenomaus, evil-souled, the ruthless slayer of youths who had sought to wed his daughter Hippodamia. His daughter Hippodamia passing wise. Yet even he, for all his chariot lore, had no such fleet-foot steeds as Atreus' son. Far slower. The wind is in the feet of these. So spake he, giving glory to the might of those good steeds, and to Atreides' self. And filled with joy was Menelaus' soul. Fun fact for anybody, by the way, who enjoys the movie or book Dune, which I certainly enjoy in both respects. Paul Atreides, the House of Atreides, that's inspired by the term in Greek mythology or Greek speech to refer to the sons of Atreus, which is Agamemnon and Menelaus, the two, Agamemnon being the leader of all the Achaeans in the Trojan War, Menelaus being his brother whose wife was Helen, and that's why they fought the Trojan War, because she was taken. The two of them together are referred to as, I pronounce it as Atreides. I believe that's how it's actually supposed to be pronounced. But in Dune, it's Atreides. It's the same spelling. But that's a nice little... There's a lot of Greek references in Dune, especially in Denis Villeneuve's movie. The Atreides planet has... Caladan has a lot of great like Greek-looking artwork. And like the tomb that he looks at was like Greek type of designs and stuff. So I like how they extrapolated that into more aesthetics. And to Atreides' self, and filled with joy was Menelaus' soul. Straightway his henchmen from the yoke-band loosed the panting team, and all those chariot lords who in the race had striven now unyoked their tempest-footed steeds. Podalirius then hasted to spread salves over all the wounds of Thoas and Eurypylus, gashes scored upon their frames when from the cars they fell. But Menelaus with exceeding joy of victory glowed. When Thetis lovely tressed gave him a golden cup, the chief possession once of Aetion the godlike, ere Achilles spoiled the far-famed burg of Thebes. Hey, welcome Azure Tundra to the show. Enjoy the narration preview. This one is book 4. We're going back and re-recording some of the opening chapters to match the quality level of the narration in the later chapters. That's the fun part about doing this as a side project over the course of a year, is that we get a lot better in that year. So that's good, at the end that's good. Welcome. Then horsemen riding upon horses came down to the course. They grasped in hand the whip, and bounding from the earth bestrode their steeds. The while with foaming mouths the coursers champed the bits, and pawed the ground, and fretted eye to dash into the course. Forth from the lines swiftly they darted, eager for the strife, wild as the blasts of roaring Boreas or shouting Notus. Notus, when with hurricane swoop he heaves the wide sea high. When in the east uprises the disastrous altar star, bringeth calamity to disastrous altar star, bringing calamity to seafarers. So swiftly they rushed, spurning with flying feet the deep dust on the plain. The riders cried each to his steed, and ever plied the lash, and shook the reins about the clashing bits. On strained the horses. From the people rose a shouting like the roaring of the sea. On across the level plain they flew. And now the flashing-footed Argive steed by Sthenelus bestridden had won the race, but from the course he swerved, and over the plain once and again rushed wide. Nor Capaneus' son, good horseman though he were, could turn him back by rein or whip, because that steed was strange still to the race-course. Yet of lineage noble was he, for in his veins the blood of swift Orion ran. Orion? I don't know if that... I guess that's a horse. I don't know what it is, though. It sounds like Orion, but it's not. Orion ran, the foal begotten by the loud piping west wind on a harpy, the fleetest of all earth-born steeds, whose feet could race against his father's swiftest blasts. Him did the blessed to Adrastus give, and from him sprang the steed of Sthenelus, which Tydeus' son had given unto his friend in hallowed Troyland. Filled with confidence in those swift feet, his rider led him forth unto the contest of the steeds that day, looking his horsemanship should surely win renown. Yet victory gladdened not his heart in that great struggle for Achilles' prizes. Nay, swift albeit he was, the king of men by skill outraced him. Shouted all the folk, glory to Agamemnon. Yet they acclaimed the steed of valiant Sthenelus and his lord, for that the fiery flying of his feet still won him second place, albeit oft wide of the course he swerved. Then Thetis gave to Atreus' son, while laughed his lips for joy, God-sprung Polydorus, breastplates silver wrought. To Sthenelus Asteropaeus' masty helm, 2 lances and a taslet strong she gave. Yea, and to all the riders who that day came at Achilles' funeral feast to strive she gave gifts. But the son of the old warlord Laertes, inly grieved to be with... But the son of the old warlord Laertes, inly grieved to be withheld from contests of the strong, how fain soever. By that sore wound which Alcon dealt to him in the grim fight, round dead Aeacus' son. Right, because that's Odysseus, the son of Laertes, by the way. Odysseus was injured. His leg was stabbed through by a guy while he was saving Achilles' corpse from the battle. That's kind of like a thing in... If you think about it now, especially like an honor-based society like Greece, you would kind of expect that they would respect the dead, even of their enemies, which they did. But on the battlefield, while the war was still going... not only would they like totally disrespect the corpses, but sometimes they would try to take them, most of the time actually, they would try to take them and then steal the armor from it, like loot the corpse in the middle of the fight and wear that armor. And that happens a lot in the Iliad and in this story. And so it's like a big deal when a major warrior falls in battle, and then they all have to fight off the enemy to like take his corpse back to the city, and not let them loot the body mid-battle. I'm curious how the logistics of that work, though, because it's like kind of hard to take off all the armor, unbuckle the straps and stuff. You get stabbed while you're trying to do that. I still don't get how they do it. Anyway, ladies and gents, that's book 4 of the Posthomerica. We have a dry run here. After this off stream, I'm going to do the recording of it, and then we'll move on to more books. We have 4, 5, 6, 7 that need to get re-recorded, so best not to think too far into the future like that. We're just going to do them one at a time. Thanks for joining the show. The channel is called The Voice of Nick. The book that we're working on here is called Posthomerica, The Fall of Troy. It's, for anybody who doesn't know the way that the Greek stories go, the Iliad, which is a story of the Trojan War, does not actually depict most of the events that you or me would kind of think of when we think of the Trojan War. The fate of Achilles, the Trojan horse, the fall of actual Troy, like all that stuff is not in the Iliad. Iliad's probably the greatest story of all time, one of my favorite stories of all time, but it doesn't depict any of that stuff. This is another ancient Greek story that does. It picks up literally right where the Iliad left off and leads directly into the Odyssey. So it's kind of like a perfect bridge between Homer's stories, which is why the title Posthomerica, it's like after Homer. It's meant as like a bridge between those. So if you guys want to find it, I'm what you just saw here. I'm producing my own audiobook of it, and I'm publishing my own illustrated and annotated text edition of the story as well. You'll be able to find the text edition on Amazon. You'll be able to find the audiobook on Audible and Amazon and maybe Apple Books. I don't know how that gets disseminated, but they're not out yet, but you can find my other Audible editions if you click the link that I just posted in the chat, or keep your eye out for Posthomerica. You'll see it on my social media and on the front page of my Twitch whenever it comes out. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye.